Hi there, welcome to today's video. It's a bit of a different one. Decided to take a week away from clay making just to have a bit of a talky video for a change. It's always good to mix things up. This is the third time I've tried recording some footage for this video. I've just not had very much luck really. I've been in the spare room really because I thought the lighting was a bit better in there. It's really difficult with glasses to try and avoid glare, so yeah, it's not been brilliant. So I'm back in the studio, which means there may be some traffic noise. I have been advised by a few of you that the traffic noise isn't quite as bad as I think it is, which is quite comforting, but you know, I'm pretty sure that you can hear bits and bobs, so apologies for that, and I will try and do my best to minimise that in editing, but not everything can be captured, unfortunately. But anyway, on to today's video. So I thought for today's video it might be quite a nice idea to talk about my journey as a clay artist and how I developed my own unique style. I think it's always quite an interesting topic, and it's something that I really am keen to hear about from other artists on YouTube. So yeah, I thought it was about time that I did my own really. And to get things started, I think it's probably easiest if I were to talk about my arts education first, because it does tie in quite nicely. So I started a HND course in 2009, I believe it was, and that was in visual communication. So it was a multimedia course that had various modules covering all sorts of subjects, such as graphic design, illustration. There was some digital arts included in there, some photography, and some other modules that I can't quite remember off the top of my head. So I thought I'd be going to art school really to build on my existing illustration skills, really because I've always been like a cartoonist really, sort of hand rendered, very cartoon-like work, and I always felt that I hadn't given it enough attention in my earlier life, so I really wanted to spend the time and devotion really to build on those skills. But it was a really different experience from what I'd imagined it to be, because I just really found everything interesting and wanted to do my best in all subjects that were covered. So it was on that course that we undertook a clay workshop one day for the whole of the day, and we all turned up a bit like, oh crikey, what's this going to be like? Because we had all sorts of project work going on as well, so it felt like another thing to do. But I really enjoyed it. I was enthralled by the material pretty much straight away. It wasn't ever a subject or a material that I'd previously been interested in really. I was just very sort of blinkered in terms of hand-rendered illustration. It hadn't even dawned on me that there's a whole variety of illustration techniques out there. So yeah, that was really interesting. And it wasn't long after that I started on the photography module, so I had a brand new brief to work on. And at that time, toy photography was really popular, and it still is actually, and rightly so. There's some brilliant work out there. But in particular, Lego was a real thing at the time. So I just thought, well, I wonder if I could create a project where I made my own models from air dry clay, and yeah, just see what happens really. So I basically made this book, which is may contain spoilers. And basically I decided on a list of about 40 films, and or probably more than 40 actually, and I just decided to create or reimagine some movie scenes and just create my own little world really. I'll just show you a couple here. There's the Elephant Man. So yeah, basically I just decided to recreate movie scenes with my air dry clay characters and some little props. So I don't want to show you too many of them actually, because I think what I'd quite like to do is like a little movie quiz. And I've done one already on the channel. I'll link to that above maybe. Basically you just go and try and guess the movie posters that I've created there. I've taken all the titles and taglines off, so yeah, go and guess as many as you can. So yeah, I'd like to do something similar with this project at some point soon. But it transpired that this was a really important project for me to undertake, because it basically led to my fascination with pop culture really, and polymer clay. So after I finished my HND course, I then went on to do a full-time degree top-up course, again in visual communication, but this time I specialised in illustration. So I was kind of taken up with that for a year, but once I graduated, I then decided to really try and get to know polymer clay as a material. That wasn't something that I'd worked with before. I'd only used air dry clay so far. So yeah, it was quite a difficult experience, I have to say, in trying to learn how to use and manipulate polymer clay. It's very different to air dry clay, as I'm sure you're aware. Whereas with air dry clay, it doesn't really matter too much about you know, how neat your work is, because it's quite a rough material, so it's got its own kind of aesthetic. But with polymer clay, the aim is really to try and make things as neat as possible. So they're almost at opposite ends of the spectrum really, in terms of neatness and ability to get detail. So that was quite an experience really. And what I was quite conscious of was that I didn't want to look at any tutorials, basically because I didn't really want to learn about any limitations of the material. I just wanted to really see how far I could push it myself. So yeah, I just learned from scratch really, and it's taken me, you know, quite some time to get to a stage where I like my work. It's always difficult as an artist to really like your own work, but certainly the last couple of years I'm reaching a stage now where, you know, I think, yep, definitely headed in the right direction. I'm not 100% there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be, because you always want to strive to create better work, but yeah, I'm at a point where I'm certainly confident about my work anyway. But this project was really important for me to undertake really, because I was so blinkered about my ideas of illustration and what illustration was. So it was really quite almost like a eureka moment to realise that, you know, illustration can be anything and is anything. And we live in a really visual world, so I realised that, you know, I'd like to basically make illustrations with sculptures. So that was quite an interesting process really. And it is quite interesting that I'm often described or thought of as a sculptor, but you know, I see myself primarily as an illustrator who just happens to create sculptural work for the purposes of image making really. You know, of course I am a sculptor, but for me that's always felt like second place almost to image making or illustration making. So because I hated a lot of my old work, unfortunately I've just binned it along the way. It's really difficult, isn't it? If you're in any way creative and you're on a creative journey, I don't know, it's a bit cringy looking back at old work. So I've just always, you know, when I've felt like I've had enough from a piece and I'm, you know, happy looking at it and I've learned enough from it, I just don't want to see it again. So unfortunately I've not kept a lot of old work, if very much at all actually. So I won't be able to chart a lot of progress today, but what I have done is I've managed to track down online my first poster or movie poster that I made with polymer clay, which is, you know, really integral to my growth actually, and how I've evolved as an illustrator. So here is my poster for Only God Forgives, and basically Little White Lies, which is a fabulous film magazine. They occasionally send out creative invites for artists to get involved by creating movie posters or other imagery, and at this point they just asked for fan art basically for Only God Forgives. So I just thought it was a good opportunity to, you know, start a whole new project. So the work itself is awful. But you know, we all have to start somewhere, and I was kind of proud of it at the time, but certainly, you know, now it's I'm a bit horrified by it. But it's, you know, an important part of the process really. So after that, I then decided to really try and find a way where I could marry up polymer clay and pop culture really. You know, they're two areas that really interest me, and I've just thought there was loads of potential to explore that crossover point really. And at this point, I think it's really important to discuss my inspirations as an artist, or who I'm inspired by, or what work I'm inspired by. And there's definitely three that spring to mind that have been really essential for me throughout my life in terms of feeling inspired. And the first is the Muppets. Who doesn't love the Muppets? I mean, come off it. They're just amazing. I love the character design. I love how they're just able to create an emotion just by, you know, the turn of an eye or the slight opening of a mouth. They're just brilliant, and they're always been characters that I've been very much drawn to. I love their expressive eyes. They've often got very big eyes, very sort of big featured, and you know, that's been really quite attractive to me as an artist. And secondly, Garfield has been a big inspiration, and it's basically the reason why I wanted to learn how to draw. I just would read all of Jim Davis's books and just try and emulate the character as much as I could. I drew it all the time, to the point where, you know, it was pretty sort of convincing as a sort of rudimentary version of Garfield. And I think it's really important for people that are interested in drawing to really learn to draw that way. You know, pick your favourite characters and figure out how the artist has put them together, what lines they've used, in what order, and how it all comes together as, you know, its own unique form really. It's really important, and yeah, I've got a lot to thank Jim Davis for really. And thirdly, Mohr is another big inspiration of mine. I've always loved the claymations, and again, very similar kind of character design actually to certainly the Muppets in terms of, you know, big eyes, very sort of simplistic character design, but still kind of big features, very rounded form, and I've just always been drawn to that kind of aesthetic really, and it's certainly how I sort of innately draw really. And I'll probably cover drawing in a different video actually, and how I've evolved my clay work through drawing previously. But yeah, Mohr has been a big factor in my creative life. And it's quite interesting really, because there has been the odd occasion where my work has been compared to Wallace and Gromit's, which, you know, they're brilliant characters, but I've never really been personally drawn to them, certainly in the same way as Mohr for Garfield or the Muppets. But you know, I'm not dissing Nick Park or his work, because, you know, he's an incredible artist, but for me, I've always been way more drawn to Peter Lord's work. I just find Mohr to be just the epitome of a brilliant, simple character really. I just find that the character just evokes so much emotion, and although he speaks, he does speak in sort of indecipherable mumbles, so, you know, you're never quite sure what he's saying verbally, but you're pretty sure what he's saying through his body language. You know, it's very clever. So yep, the three of those, Garfield, the Muppets, Mohr, have really been important for me, and I think you can really see how they've influenced my work. I think certainly if you look at a clay Disarray figure, you can see how they can be almost traced back in their DNA to the three that I've mentioned. So it's fascinating, isn't it? And it's always interesting to hear who other artists are inspired by, particularly when you try and sort of see their influences in their own work really. So yeah, my top 3 influences there. So I think now I'm going to take you quickly through some models that I want to talk about, just because I think it might be sort of quite interesting to see the differences really. So yeah, let's go and have a look. And unfortunately, as I say, I've not got anything terribly old really, which I feel bad about now actually. I wish I'd kept hold of some just to compare and contrast really. But basically these are the oldest models that I have, and I'm just going to move out of frame so you can hopefully see them. There we go. So yeah, they're models of myself and Ian, and I made these, I want to say about 4 years ago. It was at a stage where, you know, I was definitely on the right road, I'd say. I think they're pretty detailed, and I think there's some brogues there and some Converse, but you know, they still look a little rough around the edges, certainly compared to work that I'm creating now. And they're definitely a couple of models that I'd like to recreate at some point. And I thought it would be quite interesting to see the differences between these two characters here. Now this one here, if it comes into focus, there we go, was supposed to be Alyssa from the end of the Something World TV show, but I never quite captured the likeness unfortunately. But nevertheless, it's still a really good model in terms of detail, and I want to say I created this maybe 2 years ago. So you'll see that although that there's a lot of similarities between the two, there's a lot going on in terms of refinements in the Alyssa model that, you know, just isn't there on the first. Everything looks neater, sharper, certainly a little more cartoon-like, I want to say. It just looks, for me, a bit more professional. It shows that I know what I'm doing a bit more really than the previous attempts, but you know, that's not to say that that's a terrible model or anything. It's just, it really charts the difference, I think, just, you know, even in a couple of years. And so that leads me on to, you know, the more kind of detailed models that are happening kind of these days really. So this one I did I think about a year ago, was it? Maybe slightly over. But you can see how everything's really coming on now. There's a lot more kind of precise work going on, definitely more precision there. And I've started, you know, experimenting with textures, etc. So yeah, I was really pleased with that one. So some lace elements going on, and a lot of floral stuff there, obviously. And probably one of my more recent models here is Candyman. I'll just get out of the way again. There we go. So yeah, I was really pleased with that one. Lots of gubbins going on in his stomach there, and his hook. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with that one. Again, lots of detail there with regard to texture on his coat. And lastly, here's Queen Elizabeth I. And you can see that's a super detailed piece. We've got our own necklaces, etc. But that evidences the level of detail that's going on. So that basically marks the evolution of clay disarray in a pretty short video. If you have any questions about my creative path, by all means leave those below, and I might do a follow-up video at some point. But what I would like to do is another video like this, perhaps in a couple of years, where I can chart the evolution of my work even further. It's just always interesting, isn't it, to really compare your own work with previous versions really, and that's the only competition you should ever have really, is your previous self, I think. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you next week, hopefully with another clay make. Take care, bye bye.